I had pictured her small, maybe with delicate wrists and a soft laugh that could carry through the empty halls of my ranch house. In my mind, she'd wear aprons, hum, while she cooked, and fold herself neatly into the quiet life I'd been living alone too long. That's what I thought I'd written into the newspaper advertisement. Honest rancher seeks gentle companion for frontier life. Must appreciate simple pleasures and quiet evenings. The letters I got back from Willa Blaine had seemed to fit that picture. Her script was tidy, her words full of warmth. She wrote about quilts, about books she liked to read by lamplight, about a heart that ached for peace. Every letter drew me deeper into a dream where loneliness might finally be eased. I carved a ring from oak, smoothed it until my hands blistered, because I wanted the day she stepped off that wagon to feel like a beginning. But when the dust settled and she came striding down the road, the truth hit me square in the chest. She was tall, taller than me by a good inch in her boots, broad shoulders under a faded blue dress, arms like she could hoist a sack of grain without breaking stride. She wasn't fragile, she wasn't small. She looked like the prairie had shaped her hard, as it had the rest of us. I just stood there, dumb as a fence post, while the folks who'd gathered to watch the arrival whispered and chuckled. They'd come for a show, and by the looks on their faces, they got one. A thin, wiry rancher and a bride who looked like she could wrestle a steer. My ears burned under my hat brim. I felt betrayed by my own imagination, foolish for having dreamed of lace and softness. The oak ring in my pocket suddenly felt like a cruel joke. Willa stopped a few feet away, her jaw set tight. For a second I thought I saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes, like maybe she'd expected something different, too. The silence between us stretched long enough for the laughter from the crowd to cut sharper. Mr. Sloan? Her voice was steady, but not unkind. Yes, ma'am. My throat was dry. I came a long way. She shifted the bag on her shoulder, muscles flexing under her sleeves. Would you at least sit with me so we can talk this through? It wasn't what I expected. None of this was. But my pride wouldn't let me walk away, not with half the town staring. I nodded, offered to take her bag, and felt another jolt of shame when she didn't hand it over. She carried it herself, like she didn't need me. As we walked toward the ranch house, the whispers of neighbors trailed after us. Every step felt like I was marching deeper into a mistake, but something in the way she held herself straight-backed, unafraid, kept me from turning her around right there. Maybe I was humiliated. Maybe she was uncertain. But for reasons I couldn't name, I wanted to hear her voice again before I made any final judgment. So we sat down at my table, the silence heavy, and for the first time since I'd sent that letter to the newspaper, I began to wonder if what I needed wasn't what I'd imagined at all. Morning came 10 gray. I'd slept little. Willa washed at the sink, tied her hair back with a strip of calico, and asked if there was work. Always, I said, planning to keep her out of sight, where no one could measure us. Then the shout from the road. Dakota's out. My Red Bull had lifted the latch again and trotted down the lane like he owned the county. By the time I reached the gate, he'd broken through Mrs. Henderson's fence and planted himself in her prize beds. Stems snapped, petals flew, the air turned wet and green. Emmett Sloan, she cried, hairpins flying. You stop that devil. Morrison's. Boys arrived with ropes. Neighbors lined the fence. I threw my loop. Back off, I said, trying to sound steady. He's skittish. Willa came beside me, calm as a windmill. You call him by name? Sometimes. Dakota dropped his head and pushed deeper through the tulips, tail flicking like he knew our limits. Morrison's eldest snapped his rope. It kissed a horn and fell. Dakota snorted and lunged. I yanked my loop and jumped, felt a hoof clip my heel, and slammed into the fence. Someone laughed. Heat crawled up my neck. Don't, Willa said, no shout, just a steady instruction that cut through the noise. You're making him prove something. This isn't for ladies, one boy barked. I pushed up, rope burning my palm. Willa, Stay back, he'll gore you. Maybe, she said, eyes on the bull. Or maybe he's tired of being dragged. The words landed clean. Not cruel true. Shame opened a hollow under my ribs. I'd asked the territory for a gentle wife and wound up the least certain person in my own yard. Willa stepped through the broken pickets into the garden. No rope, no hat. Just her big hands open and her voice low. Dakota, she said, like. Greeting a skittish colt Dot, he turned, blew hot breath, stamped. She didn't flinch. One step, another. The hem of her dress dragged through dirt and petals. Mrs. Henderson made a small sound, half prayer, half threat. I felt the crowd lean. Morrison said softly, "Let her try, Sloan." Everything in me wanted to take charge, to prove I was enough man for my stock, my bride, my name. But my way hadn't worked. I stopped where I was and let the rope fall slack. Willa talked to that bull like she meant every word good morning. Easy now, nothing to prove. Dakota's ears twitched. The great head dropped a hair. Easy, she breathed. Sun shouldered through the cloud and drew a stripe along her cheek and the bull's horn. The gossips forgot to whisper. Relief and terror braided tight in my chest. I hated how right she looked there, steady in ruin, commanding without swagger. Hated the mirror it held up Dot. Her hand hovered a foot from his jaw. I could smell hot hide, crushed lily, the raw edge of danger. "Willa," I said, more prayer than warning. She lifted a palm without looking back, telling me to be still. Then she stepped that last small distance that carried her from safe ground into risk, every eye pinned to the space between her hand and the beast Dot, with the whole town holding its breath. Willa Blaine walked straight into danger, taking the lead, with nothing but her voice. Asterisk, I swear my heart near stopped when she lifted her hand. Dakota's eyes rolled white, his breath huffing like steam from a train. I'd seen that bull break fence posts, scatter grown men, nearly kill a drover once. And there was Willa, no rope, no stick, just her steady voice. "You've had your say," she told him, calm, like she wasn't standing in the ruins of Mrs. Henderson's garden. "Now let's settle." The crowd stood frozen. I felt every gaze burning holes through me neighbors. Morrison, Henderson herself with fists on her hips. Their judgment clung like burrs, and I hated myself for letting Willa walk in while I stood powerless outside the fence. Dakota shifted, pawed once, twice. He lowered his head, horn tips gleaming sharp. My gut clenched. If he charged, there'd be no time to reach her. But Willa didn't move, didn't blink. She spoke again, her voice softer now, something almost gentle, words I couldn't even catch. It wasn't rope or muscle she used, it was presence. The kind you can't fake. Slowly, impossibly, the bull's shoulders eased. His head came up. He blinked at her like a boy caught in mischief. Then, as if he'd been waiting all along, he let her step close enough to brush her hand over the thick hair between his horns. A sound broke from the crowd, half gasp, half disbelief. "Lord above," Mrs. Henderson whispered. Willa scratched the great beast behind the ear like he was a barn cat. Dakota leaned into it, tail swishing slow. Then, calm as anything, she turned him toward the lane and started walking. And the bull, my bull, who had nearly killed men, followed her, docile as a Sunday lamb. I could hardly breathe. Relief flooded me, but shame rode close behind. That was my animal, my responsibility, and she'd done what I couldn't. When they reached the pen, she swung the gate wide, and Dakota walked in without fuss. Willa latched it, patted his shoulder, and stepped back out. The yard erupted in talk, voices high with astonishment, laughter edged with disbelief. Men I'd known for years shook their heads, eyes darting between Willa and me. "Never seen the like," one said. "Bull whisperer," another chuckled. "Emmett Sloan," Morrison drawled loud enough for all. "Looks like your bride wrangles better than you." Heat flooded my ears. I wanted to snap back, but my tongue stuck. Willa only brushed dirt from her hands and looked at me, just looked steady and unreadable. Something inside me twisted at that glance. I couldn't tell if she was proud or sorry or simply waiting for me to decide who I was going to be now that the whole town had seen me bested. I straightened, though my stomach churned. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson," I said, forcing my voice steady. "The damage will be made right." But every whisper, every laugh told me this morning would be remembered. Not as Emmett Sloan against Dakota the bull. No, as the day Emmett's bride tamed the beast while he stood by watching. By supper time the valley knew. News here runs like prairie fire. Men I'd traded calves with rode slow past the gate, grinning at Willa. The Henderson boys leaned on their fence, retelling the garden scene with taller horns each time. I drowned the sting in Chore's Henge cistern posts. Willa worked steady, hauling water, laying a saddle, fixing what needed fixing. She didn't strut. She didn't have to. Her competence put mine and hard relief dot near sundown hoofbeats. Samuel Morrison and his boys, F and Luke, rode up, trailing. Dust. Morrison's a big man with a belly worn like a badge and a voice that travels. He swung down, set a boot on my step, and let his eyes sweep over my bride like a rancher kicking a plank. "Evenin', Sloan," he boomed. "Heard your lady's got a knack. Thought we might offer assistance." F smirked. "We can keep the heavy work off her hands." Willa was coiling a lariat neat loops. "I have hands," she said, "and they prefer honest work to decorative offers." Snorts from the road. Heat climbed my neck. "We're fine," I said. "No shame in a mismatch," Morrison went on. "A woman like that might be better suited to someone who can meet her where she stands." Greased words reeking of challenge. Silence opened in my chest. "She's suited here," I said, hearing the thin wire in it. Luke tongued a toothpick. "We could take her out Friday, show her how we do things proper." Willa looked over, calm as a judge. "I was offered marriage, not recruitment," she said, "and I accepted as a partner, not a prize." They rocked back. Morrison's smile cooled. "Her background is respectable," I blurted. "Her letters speak for themselves." Her eyebrow ticked. I'd meant to stand beside her. I sounded like a clerk reading minutes. Morrison swept the yard, the stacked wood, patched gate, the years. He nodded once. "All right then. But if you need a man's hand, Sloan, you know where we are." Thin laughter at the road. Dust settled on the porch like ash. They mounted and rolled off slow. I stood with my jaw tight. Willa hung the rope. The quiet between us stung worse than the jeers. "I don't need saving from other men," she said at last. "I only need truth from the man I agreed to marry." I held my tongue and felt the wrong words gather anyway. "I know what they see." I said, "You're doing work I should do better." "They see what they're taught to praise," she said. "Strength they can weigh. They don't see the kinds that don't make dust." I wanted to believe her. Trouble was, part of me agreed, the old piece that measured worth by how quick a man throws a rope. It split me, the part that admired Willa, and the part that feared I'd brought home a mirror to show me everything I wasn't. "I won't apologize for who I am," Willa said. "But I won't be used to embarrass you either." I nodded, because there wasn't a better answer. "Supper in 10, I said, retreating to the one task no one watches. Laying out knives, striking a match, counting breaths until the kettle sang. Outside, the last of Morrison's dust fell onto the rail, the steps, the oak ring in my pocket, and the small pride I was trying to keep from breaking. The porch creaked under our boots that night. Neither of us spoke for a long while, just the low wind stirring the prairie grass, and the lantern throwing a weak halo across the boards. I kept my hands folded tight, thumb rubbing at the oak ring in my pocket, like it might give me an answer. She finally broke the silence. "This isn't what you pictured." I looked at her. The lamplight caught the angles of her face, strong but not unkind. "No," I admitted. "I thought you'd be smaller, gentle, someone to make the house quiet instead of loud with reminders of what I lack." Her brow furrowed. "And what do you lack, Emmett?" The words stuck, but they'd been knowing too long to hold back. Man enough. Strong enough. Every look they give me says it plain. My own bride's the one they admire. And me? I'm the fool who can't keep his bull in a pen. It burned to say it aloud, but once spoken, it poured out. I dreamed of a wife to soften things, not outshine me. And today I felt small, smaller than I ever have. The silence that followed felt like judgment. But when I risked a glance, her eyes weren't hard. They were heavy, carrying something I hadn't seen before. "Do you think I haven't heard the same thing my whole life?" she asked, voice low. Too tall, too broad, not soft enough. I was a girl who split rails when other girls sewed. Mothers hid their sons from me. I didn't fit their picture of womanhood any more than you think you fit manhood. Her hand flexed on her knee. Every letter I wrote you came from that place, from knowing what it is to be lonely because you don't measure right. I hoped maybe you'd understand. Her words sank deep. The ache in her tone mirrored the one I carried, though I'd been too blind to see it. I thought I was the only one judged. Truth was, we were both standing outside the lines people drew. "I didn't mean to shame you," I said quietly. "And I didn't come to shame you," she answered. "I came because I wanted to share a life with someone who might not mind the parts of me that scare others." The night settled soft around us. My chest felt raw, stripped bare. I'd never spoken so plain to anyone, not even my own kin. I pulled the oak ring from my pocket, turned it over in my palm. "I made this thinking it'd make you smaller in my world. Something delicate, but maybe I carved it wrong from the start." She reached out, brushing the ring with a fingertip. "Or maybe it just needs reshaping. Like us." Her smile then wasn't wide, but it was real, and it loosened something tight inside me. We sat together until the lamp sputtered out. Two people who had walked miles different, but carried the same kind of solitude. And for the first time I thought maybe this mismatch was less a mistake and more a chance neither of us expected. Asterisk. It was Willa who reached for the words I couldn't find. "You wrote me that letter about partnership," she said, voice steady as a fence post sunk deep. "Two people making each other stronger. If you meant it, ask me again, properly. Not because the town expects it, because you do." My mouth went dry. The oak ring sat warm in my palm, slick from the worry of my thumb. I'd carved it nights alone, shaping it to a woman I'd imagined, not the one before me. I stood, knees stiff, and the old boards answered with a groan. "Willa Blaine," I said, feeling foolish and honest at once. "I want you for my wife." "Then put it in my hand," she said, offering it, those hands people called too big, the hands that had gentled a bull. I set the ring against her finger and pushed. It stopped at the knuckle like I'd carved. A circle around my mistake. Heat jumped my cheeks. "It doesn't fit," I said, useless. Her laugh came soft, not cruel. "Neither did we, at first glance." She turned the ring in the light. "You didn't fail. You just measured for what you thought you needed." Shame rose, then thinned. I could hear crickets tuning in the grass, a coyote far off on the ridge, the small sounds of a world that keeps turning, whether a man's pride is bruised or not. "Let's fix it," she said, and stood. Together, we went to the shed. I laid out the pocket knife, the fine file, a scrap of oilcloth. The lamplight threw our shadows long across the bench, her shoulders a mountain, mine a ridge beside it, both belonging to the same range. I held, she steadied. I carved careful, shaving the inner edge while she kept the ring turning, a rhythm like breathing. When wood dust made a pollen of the air, she dabbed it off my knuckles with a rag. "Trade," she said after a while. "You file, I'll mind the light." So she did, angling the lamp, catching the gleam on the wood, showing me where the circle still pinched. We didn't talk about Morrison or Henderson or the way pity feels like acid when it hits. We talked about chores to split and skills to share. "My hands on the rope," I said, "could use your eye." "My hands on your ledger," she said, "could use your patience." "And the garden?" I ventured, wincing. She smiled. We'll plant hollyhocks by Mrs. Henderson's fence come spring, and bring the first bouquet ourselves. When the ring felt right, I wiped it clean and held it again. Once more, she said. I slid it over her finger. This time it went home, snug and true. I accept, she said, and there was no victory. In it only promise. On conditions, name them. First, no hiding. You stand beside me when they talk. Second, we trade lessons, your numbers for my rope, your patience for my stubborn. Third, she looked at my bare hand. You wear one too. I swallowed. I don't have, I do. From her satchel, she drew a band cut from the same scrap of oak I'd sent with my second letter, notched with a tiny line at the inside my initials, awkward but there. She'd kept it, measured me from memory, shaped it on the road. I held out my hand. The wood touched my skin, light as a promise. On the porch again, the night felt different, less like a trial, more like a beginning. I'd bet not to the town or to some idea of the husband I wasn't, but to the woman who met me where I stood. Willa, I said, and the word felt like a future I could lift. My partner. Her fingers found mine. The rings warmed together. Between our palms, we didn't need witnesses. The stars did just fine. 6 months passed, and the valley wore autumn like a cloak of gold. Cottonwoods blazed yellow, fields bowed heavy with grain, and our ranch stood stronger than I'd ever known it. Neighbors who once came to gawk now came to trade, or to ask advice. They found Willa in the barn, setting a colts, hoof right, or me in the lean-to, keeping the books balanced. They saw a rhythm they hadn't expected. Her muscle paired with my patience, her steadiness with my foresight. It wasn't quick. The first weeks, every chore felt like a test. I'd lift a sack of feed, she'd shoulder 2. I'd mend a fence, she'd clear a whole line. My pride bristled, but her glance never mocked. She didn't measure me against her strength. She measured me by what we built together. And it showed. Dakota hadn't broken a latch since we fitted. The gate the way Willa suggested, low enough for him to nudge, high enough to stay locked. She gave me credit for the design, though it was her idea. In town, when gossip rose, I answered steady, not sharp, and I found folks listening different. One evening, Morrison himself rode up. For months he hadn't darkened my lane, but now he sat his saddle stiff. Heard you're running near 60 head this fall, he said. Closer to 70, I answered. His jaw worked. Well done. Then he tipped his hat to Willa, where she stood with the bridle. Respect, plain as daylight, though it near split him to show it. After he rode off, Willa's eyes caught mine. You notice? I did. Don't matter, though. She brushed dust from her sleeve. What matters is you and me knowing who we are in this. She was right. Still, part of me savored the shift. To stand where once I shrank, to see the same mouths that laughed now keep quiet, it eased something I'd carried too long. That night, under the wide sky, I told her, they used to see me as the man who couldn't hold a bull. Now they see the man who keeps pace with Willa Blaine. And is that enough? She asked. I thought on it. The crickets sang, and the smell of cut hay hung sweet. It's more than enough, I said, because it's true. We worked side by side, season into season. My hands grew calloused in ways they hadn't before, not from trying to be more than I was, but from sharing the work that was ours. Her laugh, rare but bright, filled the house. And in the quiet, when the lamps burned low, she leaned her head on my shoulder like the gentlest woman alive, though the world swore she wasn't built that way. Come harvest, when wagons rolled past heavy with corn, folks waved different. Not at the odd pair mismatched by fate, but at a husband and wife who made something together worth admiring. And for the first time in my life, I stood tall without wishing I were someone else. They strung pine boughs along the little church, rail and tied them with scraps of calico. The whole place smelled like a winter closet, aired out in sunshine. I stood at the front with my boots newly oiled and my hat in my hands, and for once I wasn't thinking about the eyes on me. I was thinking about the woman walking up the aisle, shoulders broad as the doorway, chin lifted like she'd decided long ago never to bow to anyone who hadn't earned it. Willa glanced at me, and the old pinch under my ribs, a lifetime of coming up short, never even stirred. I didn't feel smaller beside her. I felt placed, like a fence post sunk true after years of leaning. Folks filled the pews. Henderson with a hat too fine for a church this plain. Her boys sitting stiff as fence rails. Morrison wedged into the second row, arms folded, jaw tight but eyes steady. Somewhere outside, Dakota snorted in his pen like he meant to sign the register. The preacher cleared his throat and said the words men always say at moments that don't fit easy in mouths: honor, cherish, obey. I heard them drift past and found. The ones that mattered between us, the ones we'd forged by lamplight and work. No hiding. Trade lessons, stand together when the dust kicks up. I took her hand. "Willa Blaine," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "I'll not step in front to block you or behind to let you take the blows alone. I'll stand at your shoulder. I will learn what I don't know and teach what I do without keeping score. When the town laughs, I'll be the quiet in it. When my pride rises, I'll lay it down where our life needs the space." She smiled, the small one that undoes me. "Emmett Sloan," she said. "I won't pretend to be smaller for anyone's comfort, not even yours. But I will make room for your way of being strong. I will not use my hands to shame you, only to build with you. And when the day comes I falter, and it will I'll let you steady me." I slid the resized oak ring over her finger, the circle we'd carved together in a shed full of wood, dust, and truth. It settled snug, like it had been waiting for this exact hand. She took the ring she'd made for me and pressed it past my knuckle. Warm, light, binding as a promise is when it's spoken plain. There was a hush. Then Morrison stood. For a heartbeat I thought he'd say something sharp. Instead he touched his hat and gave one short nod that looked like it cost him, but came honest. Mrs. Henderson dabbed her eye with lace and called out, "You plant those hollyhocks come spring, I'll keep the gate latched." And folks laughed. The kind of laugh that means the edge has gone out of a thing. We signed the book. Hands found our shoulders rough, respectful. Outside, the sky wore that high blue of late autumn, and the cottonwoods along the creek flashed gold like coins in a fast hand. Willa laced her fingers with mine. The rings clipped soft between our palms, wood on wood, two pieces shaped imperfect. First, then right. I looked at her and saw every version of myself I'd tried to be falling away like chaff in wind. What remained was a man who could share a life with this woman and call it even, no one towering over the other, but both tall. Where we stood, we walked down the steps into the light. People parted without thinking about it, making a path. Number 1 announced it, but it felt like a kind of blessing. Not a benediction from a book, but the simple admission that what we'd built together was stronger than any story they'd written for us at the start. At the gate, Willa squeezed my hand. "Partner," she said. "Partner," I answered, and the word settled deep, right beside whatever a man means when he says home. We headed for the wagon, the wind lifting the edge of her veil, the future open and honest as the road before us. I didn't wish for a softer bride or a softer life. I wished for nothing but the strength to keep this vow exactly as spoken, and the sense to let her keep hers, and together, whatever came, to make it ours. This is the final part.